Okay, so let's try to dissect a little bit of the few of the problems you have here. So let's go ahead and press play. You can see we get nothing on the screen itself. So there are a few little errors. I think the first thing is that you have this for loop that you're trying to go through. Um, and the first thing about that is that you start out as you would, integer is equals 0. And then you say, as long as is equals 64, is plus plus. So basically this will do nothing because you've said it's going to equal 0, and as long as it equals 64, go ahead and add to it. So that's why we don't get any display whatsoever in here. So let's say as long as it's less than 64, just do that. Okay, so we start to finally get this, right? But you can see that basically all these planet systems are right on top of it. So I'm going to hit stop there. The other thing is just, I don't know if it makes a difference, but from a formatting standpoint, I like to identify the array first. So you already have this array set up, or these nested for loops, excuse me, that are going to do the push and pop matrix. And what you need is a counter to give you the 64 solar systems that you have. You've already identified that system here. So you don't want to loop inside of this because you're going to loop right on top of it. So, but you're already using tile size as your kind of counter so that you can end up doing the translate. So what we want to do is create a second little counter that's going to help us identify which one of the solar systems we want it to display and create. So let's go ahead and say integer counter. So I'm just creating a default one. It's my own thing, and we'll call that counter. And down here we'll say counter plus plus. Right? So what it's going to do is every time it goes through the individual loops here, as it creates each tile, it will count one and then give us a new one. In every frame, it will reset back to 0 before it goes into this loop and goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 64. Right? So, and the system here, we don't want to create that here. We actually want to create these systems up here. So we're going to create this in the setup because we just want to create it once. And we will, let's just copy this, actually. Right, let me go back. This will be easier if I just do it this way. Let's copy all this. And format that, and we'll get rid of display. Right, so it's going to go through this system and create 64 of these different solar systems. And then, so we don't want to recreate one every single frame. We just want to update what they do, right? And we're not using is. Let's get that out of here, because what this would say is every time you do a tile, do 64 solar systems, right? Obviously not what we want to do. We want to do a solar system every single every tile. So what we'll do is we're going to use a different number. In this case, we're going to use counter as our way of running through, right? All right, so that's the first thing. You can see that you've set this up so that we have two planets. Sometimes it's hard to see because they're right on top of each other, and they're moving rather slowly. That's okay. So you're half of the way there. Let's go ahead and stop that. And let's go to the planet itself. Or never mind, in fact, we got the planet. Oh, I know what I was going to do is the rate's a little bit slow. Maybe we'll come back to that later, but let's go back to the solar system. So with the solar system, you've created the solar system, you put a planet in here, so you're creating one version of that class, and then you're using display twice to try to get two of them, I guess. So let's just go ahead and get rid of that. And really what we want to do is create a system that says, whenever I create a solar system, let's create a random number of planets. So again, we want to create, in fact, I'll just do it this way. Well, we'll just call it a planet. That's fine. And right now we have a planet equals a new one with 360 that's almost there. So let's, first of all, we have to tell it. And remember that in the constructor area here, this is like setup. So we do the same thing, like planet equals new planet. Okay. Now the question is, well, how many planets do we want? Well, let's do something like integer p equals an integer, and let's say random 1, 2, 5. Okay. So what's going to do is create any, we'll run this here and say, I don't know, pick a random number between 1 and 5, make sure it rounds off to a whole number, and then we'll put p in there. So that's going to be the total number of planets that this particular solar system has. And keep in mind that when we have the description of a planet, so that's one data type, and then we can go in the solar system and say this is going to be its own data type, and it can have however many planets we want it to have for each one of those solar systems. And then we just have to say, so for integer I is equals 0, I is less than, and we could do something like p or planet dot length. So that would say whatever the length of this array is, which will be determined once we select a random number and fit it in here, that's how long, that's how many planets we're going to create. Let's auto format that, which is Command T. So we'll create a new planet I. Okay, so a new version in this list of planets, the first one, the second one, the third one, however many of those we want to create, we'll get this new rotation. And this is where we use for loops all the time because we need to count through a list of things, right? So so we're going to go through the loop again and say, however many planets I have, let's go through each one of them and display them. Well, let's see what it, oops, I forgot a bracket there. All right, so you can see we have a solar system with 1 planet. We have solar systems with 4 planets in here. They're all moving a little bit slow, so it's hard to see the variation that's in there. So I'm going to go back to planet, and let's say the random rotation rate, let's just say 5. All right, so you can see some of these planets are very, hardly moving. Some of these are moving a lot faster. Whatever you want the variation to be, let's crank that up. Maybe we have little Mercury-like planets just zooming around our solar systems, right? Okay, so this, and then you could go ahead and create a little random star field or any of these things that you want to do. So let's just recap a little bit here. So you need to use for loops to create the number of systems. Make sure this should just be very vanilla as far as a for loop goes. You start at 0, you count to the total, and you go 1 at a time. So you shouldn't have to do anything else. We created a fake for loop counter here, where, this is like a primitive way of doing a for loop. So we created a variable that will do the counting for us because our for loop here is helping us figure out what the size of the tiles would be, right? So the planet, you had that done. That was, you had all the information there. That was perfectly set up. We just tweaked the rate a little bit, and then again, the idea that we want to create a list of planets for each solar system. That could be a variable number, and then whatever that number is, that will be the length of the number of planets that we create. And then when we display that, we have to run through the list of planets, however many there are, right? So voila, you were really, really close. I think it was just a little bit of syntax. Your logic of how you were trying to do it was pretty close. So anyways, I will post this, and hopefully this will help. Have a nice Thanksgiving.